Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this morning? Because it is the Good Morning Asgard podcast edition of the Welcome to Asgard podcast, episode 501. Oh man, episode 500 was awesome last night. So thank you to everyone out there that was able to join us. It was a ton of fun. Gave away a ton of Blu-rays and 4Ks and all kinds of stuff. Please also, as you're watching this morning, let me know if everything is coming through okay. We should be live on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble as well. Because I'm trying out something different this morning. I've been having a couple of issues with my OBS program. It's been crashing on me randomly. And so this morning I'm using Prism Live Studio. I've been able to import pretty much all of my scenes and such like that. So if anything doesn't seem right, if something doesn't look right, if something doesn't sound right, please let me know if something sounds very different, if I sound a lot louder than usual, if I sound normal, just let me know in the live chat. But yeah, thank you all again to everyone who joined for episode 500 last night. But on 501 today, we're going to continue, obviously, our conversations of just how amazing this community has been, how incredible it's been the last 5-6 years since I've been doing this, that we are still doing it, that we are still talking about these things. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the early reactions, some of the early reviews for The Acolyte, because The Acolyte just came out last night. I was going to watch it this morning, but unfortunately, poor little Willow, my puppy, sometimes she's been chair pup in the past. She's okay. Don't worry. She's still here. She's been having some ear infections though. So I had to bring her to the vet, and it took a lot longer than I had initially anticipated. And so therefore, because of that, I was not able to watch. I say, unfortunately, maybe it is fortunate that I was not able to watch the actual show before this morning, because it's going to save my sanity and delay my sanity for just a little bit longer. So yeah, definitely going to be something. I think that it's like a blessing in disguise, we could say, not being able to watch that before the stream. But I will be watching it. Don't worry, I will be watching it. We'll be sharing my thoughts about that. Obviously, I have to watch it for FNT, though, depending on, still need to finalize my plans for Dallas. So still need to get the okay from the wifey, from the lady Freya, because I know that she's not, again, wanting me to go, because it's better for me to stay than to go, clearly. But we'll see what happens with that. Again, leaning towards being able to go, but we of course have a lot of moving parts here with kids and everything else also. But if you are going to be in Dallas, then I cannot wait to get in touch with y'all, to hang out with y'all, and to be able to see y'all. So if anyone's going to the Dallas trip, please let me know. Again, right now my plan is to be going. Of course, it's a very long drive, about an 11-hour drive for me, and a very quick trip. So if I do go, it'll be me driving in on Friday, being there all day Saturday, and then leaving early on Sunday after Mass. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and say hello to the people who are here this morning. So first, starting off with Scott McKenzie. What's going on, good sir? Scott McKenzie was in the chat last night. Thank you for being here once again. Prince Screen, who is also a member on the channel. Scott and Prince Screen, both members. Hail to you. Thank y'all for being here. Brian Kadersha. I hope I'm saying that correct. Brian Kadersha, welcome to the chat. Hail to you. Heartbreak Ridge in the chat. What is going on, Heartbreak Ridge? One of our winners from last night. Keely Chow, another winner from last night, says, hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning to you. Ambrose Chamberpot, hello. Hello, Ambrose Chamberpot. Hope you are doing well. Sandy in the chat saying, yes, sir, NYC calling in. Absolutely. Where are our people this morning? Because obviously with the morning streams, we're able to reach out to people from all across the United States in different time zones, but also a little bit of a better time for some of our overseas subscribers too. So if you're from overseas, let us know. And Keely Chow indeed is laying down some of the rules. So obviously, the man with orange hat is probably sleeping in at this point. So he usually is just there on the evening streams on Tuesdays. So please be on your best behavior. Keely Chow is good again. kind of lay down the law a little bit, saying no cussing, don't give anyone you don't like the middle finger. Indeed, we're a respectful chat. We try to keep ourselves PG, maybe on occasion PG-13, especially if someone like General Wingster, or as we named him and dubbed him last night, Mr. Wink, is in the chat. But ultimately, we keep it clean. Fear of FEMA. Morning. Good morning to you, Fear of FEMA. We got Father Luca. I know that he is one of our European brethren there. Father Luca saying, Laudetur Jesus Christus in secula. Absolutely. God bless you, Father Luca. Today being, of course, the feast of Saint Boniface. Saint Boniface, who was a bishop and martyr. So there it is. There it is right there. Heartbreak Ridge indeed saying, you dodged a bullet, so to speak. Yeah. Definitely not happy that my puppy is not feeling well. Obviously, she's got a yeast ear infection, and she's kind of been prone to those ever since we've moved to Tennessee. It's so funny because she had no allergies at all when we were living in New Orleans, and it was our dog River that actually had all of the allergies. Was just biting at her fur. She was actually, it was so bad down because she had a very bad bad nut allergy, and we had a pecan tree that was in our backyard. It wasn't our tree, but it was in our backyard, and so pecans wherever, no matter what we did, it was always there. Even if we were, being very vigilant about it, she would of course still get access to them. And eventually, when we finally figured that out, we were able to help her. But she at one point was like bald on the bottom of her body because she kept picking out her hair. But then we moved here, and then she's had no issues whatsoever. But then poor Willow has had all of these allergies. She has to be on allergy medication and all this stuff. And so it's been a while since she's had an ear infection, though. So, I'm glad that has not been a reoccurring thing more recently. But, yeah, it's that time of year where these things start to happen. So, because, again, dodged a bullet, you could say, because I was not able to watch The Acolyte myself. But we do have some early reactions and early reviews and some really good people covering that. And we'll talk about what we have been hearing so far since it came out last night. Father Lucas says, sorry for not being there for the stream last night, but it was a little late. Yeah, it was a little bit late, right? A wee bit late for you, Father Luca, especially for anyone else who is in Europe for sure. Let's see. Super Omicron, what's going on? Super Omicron saying, wouldn't it be great for Star Wars MCU to return to greatness? So we have a great amount of things to talk about. Wouldn't that be amazing? Unfortunately, that's just not going to happen while the current people who are in charge of Lucasfilm, who are in charge of Disney, are in power. Because it's interesting how they seem to be so allergic themselves, just like my little puppy has allergies. It seems like they are allergic to money and to success. Obviously for they themselves personally, they're making all the money in the world, right? They're making bank with their salaries and things like that, but they're driving their company into the ground. And that's why, and I've said this constantly before, the only way anything is going to change at Disney is if the stockholders, if the shareholders actually start to hold them accountable. And it's a difficult thing to do, right? But they're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the power, and you need to have enough, and there needs to be, I think, an organized effort on behalf of shareholders, on behalf of the stockholders to say enough is enough. There needs to be a change at the top. Bob Iger's not the guy anymore. All right. Maybe at one time he was the guy. He was great at acquiring things. When he had the right people creatively, he had a lot of success. He's been with Disney for a long time, but it wasn't because of his creativity. It was because of him using the creativity of others, people who, in fact, he would be very quick and soon to abandon completely because of hugs, as in the case of John Lasseter, right? I mean, talk about a massive loss. And Pixar has not been the same ever since. And I think that when you get Inside Out 2 coming out, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, obviously talking not only Acolyte reviews, but also talking about the update to the summer box office, with the early projections being as high as they are for that movie. I'm just looking around, all right, just ear to the ground, trying to see the reactions from people, understanding, especially now as being a parent, right? When the first Inside Out film came out, my kids weren't here yet. But now that I have my kids, I'm looking at it from an entirely different lens. I'm looking at that movie not simply as just, oh, it's another film given out by Disney, given out by Pixar. It is now, oh, this is something that my kids might watch. And the question then has to be asked, is this something that my kids should watch? Is there something in here that I don't want my kids to see? Is there something in here that could be, problematic? Is there something in here that could, be harmful or could be, damaging in some way? And I think that's a huge part of why they've in many ways lost a huge portion of their audience. But yeah, it would be great if those things were great. It would be great if those things became great once again. The ultimate issue, though, is the people in power, the people in charge. Let's see. Keely Chow says, "Hail Odin, how are you, Lord? How are you, Thor, Freya, Baby Sif doing? Everyone's doing well. Freya's at work. She works from home, and so she is in her office working. And then the kids are at the daycare, the summer daycare at this point. And both of them are doing well. Baby Thor it's getting to the point now where he's been, he's that three-nager. That's what they're often called now, the three-nager age. You hear about the terrible twos. It's like, yeah, terrible twos got nothing on three-nagers, let me tell you. But he's getting ever closer to 4, right? He's just more like a few months away in October, and I think he finally has turned a corner. So now there's a lot more good times versus tough times, right? Because sometimes because the prefrontal cortex or whatever part of their brain isn't fully developed that helps to regulate emotion, that has and deals with things like empathy. Those are things that are finally starting to develop to some degree. So that has, I think, been a huge help. And that's why, the trip, yeah, I talked about it a little bit last night, but, we went this past weekend to Louisiana to see some family. And there's a place that I did shows because I'm into musical theater. People don't know that about me, but I did theater for over 20 years of my life. And I there's one place there that I have a very strong connection to because it's where I started my love of theater, my performance of theater, and the first roles that I ever got, the first leads I ever got were from that. And so they do their set building around this time. And so I try to go back every year when I can. So this year I was actually able to bring Thor with me. I was able to bring my son with me, and it was a really good trip. Again, it's about a 6-7 hour drive, and he was awesome. The only really bad thing that happened was on the way back, he got car sick. Because that's happened before, and luckily it was just car sickness and it wasn't anything else. Poor little guy. It was so sad because it was just like, oh, it's gonna be okay, buddy. Because I'm driving. There's nothing else. There's nothing else I can do. I can't just pull over right away. Luckily, there was also a stop, right, a rest stop that wasn't too far away either. But he was awesome. He was great, and it was really cool just talking with him about the things that he's seeing, the places that we're going. It's like, man, you're a little human being, man. It's like, of course, we know that they're little humans, but then when you actually start communicating with them, I'm not having any deep philosophical conversations with Thor yet, but it's kind of that point where I'm like, man, one day I will, and that's crazy to me. I am JMS. What's going on? He says, sup to you. FH Adherent says, cool pick, Odin. Blessed be Theotoko. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so shout out to Meaning of Catholic and to Bishop Athanasius Schneider. This is under Our Lady of Fatima. This is the Eastern icon of Our Lady of Fatima underneath the the confraternity that is under Bishop Athanasius Schneider. So it's one to help. Basically, the funds for this go to support the building. They're building a chapel in Russia, actually. They're building it's a Russian icon, and so they're building a chapel with the title being Our Lady of Fatima. And the main idea is, and if you remember anything from the messages of Our Lady of Fatima, it was about the errors of Russia, right, spreading across the world, those errors being communism. I think that we can pretty much see that those prophecies have indeed been fulfilled, right? There's communism everywhere these days, and so that went to go support that. And yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. Tina Guzman, what's going on? Good morning. Good morning. Father Luca, who are here this morning laughing in European afternoon? Oh, yes, indeed. Who's here this morning? For my European brethren, good afternoon. Some might even be the evening time. Nearsize Cyclops, what is going on? Hail to you, Sandy. Love the morning streams. Love doing them. There he is. Orange Hat is here. I am here, curious of your acolyte thoughts, and I will lay down the law. Awesome. So I mentioned, and I don't know, because obviously that was at 10:05. It's 10:14. I was not able to see the Acolyte, unfortunately, before the show. I was trying to, but my puppy needed my help. She needed to go to the doctor. And the initial plan was, because they had no appointments today, so we were going to drop her off. And then when they were able to get to her, they would get to her. I get there to drop her off, and they're like, oh, there's a cancellation, so you want to go ahead and have her seen? It's like, well, I can't just say, no, take her. It's like, I would feel bad. It's like, no, you have to take her because I have plans. It's like, no, I'm going to stay there, see the doctor, everything. But of course, that backs up everything time-wise, and so I wasn't able to watch it. But we're still talking about it because we do have some early reactions and reviews. We'll be looking at an article by the great John F. Trent. Joey Horn says, "Hail Odin. Hail to the chat. Absolutely. Hail to y'all. Thank y'all for being here." Remember, if you have a comment or question, just put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment, @Odin. Lets me know that you're trying to get my attention. We are live on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. I'm not seeing any activity over on the Rumbles or on the Odysseys, which is all right, because I know that everyone's on different times, different schedules. Obviously, just making sure that those are working, because I am using something a little bit different this morning. I am using Prism Live Studio because OBS has been crashing on me. And so this is essentially, it's a rebuild of OBS. OBS being open source, they're taking the basic frame of OBS and then putting some other features into it. So far, I'm liking it a lot, but obviously want to make sure everything is everything is working. IJMS says, Acolyte has some bad acting in it. I can't say I'm surprised. Keely Chow, a bullet not fired by Alec Baldwin. Yes. Always great to avoid those. Print Screen, I've heard the Acolyte is of similar quality to The Last Jedi. Oof. I don't know. I honestly think that is, yeah, I mean, the oof is right, because that's an insult, right? That's actually probably more of an, based on what I'm hearing about the Acolyte, that sounds actually more of an insult to The Last Jedi. Because even though The Last Jedi is garbage, I mean, the story is what destroys that film. There's at least some visual things in there where you're like, okay, at least that looks nice. Good job, visual effects team. Right? Even though the whole, I've said this constantly before too, right? It's been so long since we've really had conversations about Last Jedi in any, detailed way. But I still believe and hold and will definitely argue that when it comes to the visual effect of the Holdo maneuver, it's beautiful. The visual effect. The application, what it means, no, absolutely not, right? The Holdo maneuver is one of the worst things that they've ever done in Star Wars, because of what it does to everything previous, especially with the whole, oh, so you could have done that at any time? And people will say, well, in the movie they say that it's got X amount of chances of, it's not likely to happen, but it could, or hasn't been tested, it's a theory, etc. It's like, yeah, but that just, again, it destroys so much of the coolness that is the fighting and destroying of the Death Star both times, right? Because it's like, oh, you could just put a droid inside of a ship, put it to light speed, and so it's like, even when you use the whole untested theory, it's like, okay, so take 100 ships and then 100 droids, put them into them, have them go light speed, and at least one of them might be able to actually do something. It's silly. It really, really is very silly. Let's see what we got here. Orange Hat tagged to say, I gave my thoughts on X. It has problems, but also decent parts. Carrie-Anne Moss did a good job in it, but I don't consider this Star Wars. It reads more like fan fiction without the fan. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the vibe that I've been getting from the show as well. It just, every visual, every picture, every trailer, I look at it and I think, this just doesn't look like Star Wars. You can put the robes on a person. You can show the lightsabers. But there is something more to it than that. It kind of goes back to me after having watched the atrocity that was the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. That was a series that really could have been great. You had Ewan McGregor back. You had Hayden Christensen back. Even though there's some issues, I think, continuity-wise by bringing Hayden Christensen back. But still, you could have had, and they did, right, those flashbacks where you have the de-aging, which, again, I wish their de-aging was better. But you could have had that. It could have been a really cool moment, and you could have had a really, really cool story. But instead, it turned into really, 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 really bad fan fiction by people, as you rightly say, who are not actually fans of the content. But it does not surprise you that when the person at the top of all of this, Kathleen Kennedy, has already gone on record years ago having said, well, yeah, you know what? We had no source material. We had nothing to work with. She either is completely ignorant of reality or she's lying, or a bit of both. Because not only did George Lucas tell us and confirm to us that, oh no, I had a plan, I had all this plan laid out, and they decided, no, George, that's okay. So George himself actually had a plan for the movies to continue the on, but then you add on top of that the fact that that's also ignoring the entirety of the EU, much of which can work within continuity of what had been previously established by the other films. So it doesn't surprise me to hear these types of reactions, and to me, that I think the bigger question is not even how bad is it compared to The Last Jedi, because we all know The Last Jedi is bad because of what it did, what it did and what it does to Star Wars, right? My question is actually more about just general quality. Like, Obi-Wan is a terrible series. Like, just objectively speaking, it is poorly written, poorly directed, poorly shot. Everything looks fake and artificial. It boggles the mind to know that they spent as much money as they did on these projects. The fact that this Acolyte show, based on all the things that I've seen, as far as the trailers and images, for people to say, oh yeah, this costs $180 million to make. So I think it's 8 total episodes, $180 million. So they're spending roughly, $22.5 million on every episode. For those that have seen these first 2 episodes, can you tell me, did it look like there was $20 million plus invested in that episode? And if so, what do you think it was actually spent on? Would love to hear y'all's thoughts. Joey's Movie Blog says, I'm not even going to bother with Acolyte. I wouldn't. Typically, I wouldn't. But obviously, FNT, we're going to talk about it. But I was mentioning, if I end up going to Dallas, then I actually probably won't be on FNT because I'll be driving up Friday. And by the time FNT goes live, I'm still going to be on the road because it is such a long drive. Obviously, I could remote in from the road, but something tells me that probably won't like that. Probably won't like that if I had to guess. We'll see. Let's see. Alyssa, what's going on? Welcome to the chats. Ambrose, who is a member. Remember, if you have a comment or question you want me to read out loud, just put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. Don't try to put anything behind a paywall here. But if you are a member, you don't have to worry about doing the tag. But it does help. Ambrose says, maybe I'll just watch the last episode, which had been advisable with Kenobi. Maybe, right? See, hey, maybe I should see where this thing is going before I invest time into this. The Morak, what's going on, brother? Got your message. So for anyone who won the giveaways last night, if you were not here, I gave, 16 people win giveaways. So right now I'm in the process of making the despecialized edition Blu-rays for the Star Wars despecialized editions. I've got my stack of films over here. I've got the shipping labels out, so I can hopefully get most of the giveaways in the mail today. Obviously, not all of them are going to be able to fit in the mailbox. Might have to do a run to the post office if I can, but just keep in mind, I am going to try and get those out sometime today or tomorrow before I leave for the trip, if I do. Forever Sci-Fi being a member. What's up, Forever Sci-Fi? Holdo herself could have sent a droid. She could have also put the people on the other ship and sent them off, not bring them on the one being tracked. There's a lot of things that could have happened, but again, not a lot of thought was being put into the story as far as it working within continuity with itself and as working within continuity with everything that came before. Now, what I do find interesting, though, is that one could potentially argue that it is, quote-unquote, well-written from the perspective that Johnson knew exactly what he was doing because he knew he was trying to deconstruct Star Wars. So if the goal was to deconstruct Star Wars, then sure, I think you could argue, actually, even, hey, he did a great job. However, when you deconstruct something, especially like Star Wars, and then you deconstruct it to establish something else, you better be establishing something better, and that's not something he did in any way whatsoever. Sebastian, who's a member, what's up, says, how do you think Bad Boys 4 will do at the box office getting Will Smith's current reputation? I honestly don't think his reputation is going to have one shred of impact on the Bad Boys box office. I think whatever that box office was going to be when they announced it is what it's going to be. Remember, stars really don't move the needle all that much anymore. It goes back to how everyone, when the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare came out, everyone was saying, oh, well, you know what? This is going to bomb because of the comments made by Alan Ritchson. And I kept trying to argue with people, and I kept trying to be clear to people saying, no. The movie is going to fail because it was already going to fail. Because if you look to the history of the Guy Ritchie films that have come out the last few years, none of them have been huge successes. The most successful one he has made so far the last 10 years has been, and again, obviously, I'm not counting Aladdin because Aladdin's garbage, but as far as actual, and it's not really even a film, but as far as actual films that he has made, the most successful one that he made was The Gentleman back in 2019. It's about 5 years ago. All the films he's made since then, I've loved, I've enjoyed, Wrath of Man, though, wasn't as successful as The Gentleman. Last year, some of my favorite films were Guy Ritchie films. The Covenant, great film, didn't make money. Operation Fortune, Roost de Guerre, great film, funny film, didn't make money. So when this movie was about to come out, I said, it doesn't matter what Alan Ritchson said. Sure, it's definitely not going to help the movie. One could argue that point, that it didn't help the movie. But to say that that is a reason or even a primary reason as to why that film failed is just not looking at the actual data and not being honest. So going into Bad Boys 4, I'm looking at that thinking, okay, Bad Boy 4 is going to make whatever Bad Boys 4 is going to make, and not a lot of people are going to be making their decision based off of, well, you remember when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars? Because remember, everyone was watching the Oscars, right? Everyone heard about that story secondhand. The amount of people that were actually watching that live, minimal. And when you read something secondhand, normally you're like, oh, that's kind of crazy. You see the videos, you see the memes. And guess what? When you see it in meme form, especially, guess what? It ends up being funny. So it's not going to really keep people from going to see it. If they were going to see it already, they're going to keep going to see it. If anything, you might have motivated more people to go see it because people want to, see the guy who slapped Chris Rock and to see what happens. I get that's kind of where that is. Now, as far as what I think it's going to make, we'll go more into that when we do some box office talk after our Acolyte reviews talk, but I don't think it's going to be very good. I'm seeing some big numbers being projected right now, and I've got doubts about it. But also, I will be frank, I am not a Bad Boys guy. It's not a franchise I have any investment in or even really knowledge of, so basically all I can do is look at how have the previous Bad Boy films done? Is this looking to do similar equivalent numbers or even just a little bit less numbers? Because there is a built-in audience, clearly. You don't make 4 Bad Boys films unless there's a built-in audience. So, anyway, Orange Hat at 1021 says, also, their marketing is saying they're putting identity politics into it. However, I didn't see any of that so far. No race or sexual preference crap like their marketing suggests. Well, apparently, and we'll talk about this in a second, it is in episode 3 that things are going to get real bad. So we'll talk about that. Prince Green, they spent $22 million on an episode of The Acolyte when one whole Godzilla movie cost $15 million. That, I think, is going to be that standard that we're going to keep on bringing up for years to come, right? Especially when it comes to the episodic television. We're going to look to The Rings of Power Season 2, where they're spending countless millions of dollars per episode, and say, how is it that a guy and a very small team of animators can make Godzilla -1 and make it look as amazing visually as they did for what little money they had, and yet massive Amazon studios, massive Disney studios, massive Hollywood studios can't, for more money, be able to do similar work? And we know it has to do a lot more to do with quantity over quality, right? Just because you have all the money in the world and you have 100 different people on a team, that does not mean that your product's going to be any better. I think another great example of that movie-wise is, how oftentimes some of the worst movies have more than one writer? I don't know if you've ever noticed that trend, right? You see sometimes there's movies where it's like 5 people listed for the screenplay. And you're like, oh, well, maybe that's why it sucked, because that's 5 different minds, all with their own view of a character, all with their own view of a motivation for a character, all with their own desires of where they want to see the story progress. And there's going to have to be, obviously, tension and that pulling away that happens. Sometimes multiple writers can work with something maybe like a comedy, because you have different people writing jokes. But even then, if you have just tonal shifts all over the place, even with your jokes, that also can create a bit of a problem. Sebastian says here, do you have any excitement or hope in Gladiator 2? Personally, I don't. I thought the first Gladiator was good. I think it's far too removed from it for there to be, for me, a lot of excitement about the second one. I'll probably end up seeing it because it's probably going to be at least one of the more on paper exciting films that we have left. I think it comes out, this year, right? But as far as, is it one of my most anticipated? No, it's definitely not. INJMS says it's kind of boring and dry as well. I assume talking there about the show. Hardby Ridge, who's a member, says, apparently Rolling Stone article about Acolyte that had people screaming got a paragraph cut out and put back up without explanation. Yeah, I heard about that story. So for those that don't know, I believe this is the one where there was an article that came out because the review embargo was almost lifted. It came out. It was very negative of the show. It got lambasted, and then by the evening, within an hour or 2 hours or so, it was gone. It had disappeared. And so some people had speculation. I thought I heard someone mention that there was the potential that it got released before the embargo was lifted. So that could be part of it. As far as the paragraph, though, if that's the case, then it could be also that it got released early and before it had gone through proper channels and editing, and maybe it was a paragraph that needed to be cut out. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people talking, whatever that paragraph is. I'm sure it'd be people analyzing the content of that paragraph. So that way, maybe, just maybe, there is going to be something else to it. All right, let's go ahead then and go into our first story today. And that is going to be talking a little bit about the reviews for the Acolyte. So again, just as a bit of a preemptive to this, I have not watched it yet. I was going to see it this morning. But if you are just joining the stream, I was not able to watch it because my dog Willow has an ear infection and I had to bring her to the vet, and it took a lot longer than I had anticipated, and so my time went away from me. But we do have some early reviews and reactions, and right now it's not looking good. Right now the early reactions, and not just talking even about the fandom, right? Not even just talking about the fellowship community and our reactions to this, but even in the mainstream, there are a lot less defenders of Star Wars, right? Back in the day, it used to be that you could get almost every major publication to give softball reviews. If they weren't going to be openly critical, which some might, they at the very least wouldn't destroy it altogether, right? They would give it that mediocre review. And I pointed this out when I called out the hypocrisy of Rotten Tomatoes about how you could give a movie a 5 out of 10 2 different times, but because of how Rotten Tomatoes works, if you have an 86% fresh rating, never buy those. Never believe those numbers, because what you find when you dive into the data is that means that 86% in that case of the critics clicked the fresh button. That's something that the critic chooses, because if I as a critic am a writer for Rotten Tomatoes and I put a review for 5 out of 10, guess what? If I put a 5 out of 10, I can choose fresh still. So you could have a movie, theoretically, you could have a movie with a 100% fresh rating, but every single movie reviewer gives it a 5 out of 10. Technically, that can happen. So the rating of Rotten Tomatoes is not a good metric. That's why I highly recommend people using Critic List, because it's a much fairer metric. But let's go ahead and dive into this first article here. This is from thatparkplace.com. Great channel. Shout out to WW Pro, to John F. Trent, Valiant Renegade, everyone involved, Jonas, everyone involved with That Park Place. And here is an article written by John F. Trent yesterday, and it says this: early critic reviews for Leslie Headland, The Acolytes are mediocre. That's definitely not a look you want to have if your biggest fans, your biggest defenders and supporters, the mainstream media, if even they can't support your crap, oh boy. Not looking good. He starts off, Access Media Critics reviews for Leslie Headland's Star Wars The Acolyte series are not looking good. Rotten Tomatoes, the series is currently at 83% score with 35 fresh and 7 rotten reviews. The average rating for this series is a 7.3 out of 10. All right, so this is another thing to look into. Now, I typically don't like going to Rotten Tomatoes, but let's just see if that score has updated. It's now up to 88 with the audience score at, at 45. But look at this. This is something that I do think. Oh, no, hold on. That's the top critics. So it's actually gone down. 7.3 out of 10, 6.5 for the top critics. Both of them are actually still fresh. That's why Rotten Tomatoes is garbage, and I want it off my screen. But here's the first thing I want to point out, right? So back when it was 35 fresh, 7 rotten, 83%, okay? Look at that one major difference that you can already see. 83% is what the tomato meter says, but the rating is 7.3 out of 10. So that would be technically 73%, right? So this goes ahead and shows you one of the problems that already exist. One thing to keep in mind, and one thing, I guess, to keep fair, you always got to try to steel man and to be fair when we can. One of the problems also with Rotten Tomatoes is that for the people that are officially accredited to review movies on Rotten Tomatoes, you do not have to use any type of grading scale to review on Rotten Tomatoes. So I could be a writer for Forbes, for the New York Times, for the Washington Post, all places that I'll never write for because I never want to write for them. And I could put my review out and I could end it by not giving it a grade. My review is simply what it is. And so if I then submit that to Rotten Tomatoes and I don't have an actual number score, all then I can do is click either fresh or rotten. And so that's why even that 7.3 may not even be that accurate, because if that only exists, that is only there if a person has put forward a numerical score for a movie or for a show. Okay? So if you are using letter grades, if you're using things like that, then it will not be there. That's why typically, obviously, Critic List, I think, is that much better. But that's also why I prefer something like Metacritic. It's not perfect either, but it tends to be a bit more accurate to what is likely the case. Okay? So as you'll see right here, the Acolyte on Metacritic is at a 69. Because for them, they have it so that if you have a numerical score, it is what it is. But if you have a letter score, so let's say I'm a reviewer and I put it's an A, it's a B, they have a numerical calculation to give X amount of points or X amount of credits for it. So if you have an A, it's a 9 out of 10 on the scale, right? And so therefore, they're able to take more reviews in and give a probably more accurate calculation. So again, 69, that makes a lot more sense to me, right? It's still positive, still probably way more positive than it should be. And what I'm going to be interested in is, again, according to this is 17 reviews have come out from critics. 17 have been positive. So 65% of the reviews for the show have been positive. 35% of the reviews have been mixed, and there were no negative reviews, at least at that point, okay? Whereas 98 ratings, vast majority of the ratings for the audience score have been negative, but this is something that we should be pretty used to at this point, because obviously there is, quote unquote review bombing across the board. And I say that in quotes because, come on. Anyway, the top critic score sits at 65% with 11 fresh and 6 rotten scores. The average rating is 6.4 out of 10, so obviously that has changed. It's gone up to now 70%, but clearly the top critics, these are the ones that are in the major publications typically. These are the big names. This would be where you would find in the old days the Siskel and Eberts of the world, right? The ones who are the most respected. And so it's a lot harder of a sell right now for them, but even they are starting to give it a little bit more of that protection that we are typically used to seeing when it comes to a lot of Disney content. All right. Here's what the actual critics are saying, though. So John F. Trent tells us this. He says, Julian Romaine at MovieWeb gives the show a rotten 2 out of 5. He writes, Star Wars The Acolyte unfortunately lives up to the hype as a series that will divide fans. Problems lie in the plot's execution, overall vision of the characters, Star Wars universe, and puzzling inconsistencies in the use of the Force. Yeah, and that's been one of the most frustrating things of all of the changes made by Disney, right? Is that they are just making up Force powers. And the only good argument that they have is not even, oh, well, look at how we wrote it into our show. Right? It's not that they were able to write the Force power in such a way where you're like, this makes so much sense. No. Instead, their excuse is, well, if you look into the EU, right, they're trying to throw a bone, basically saying, well, in the EU, there was this or that. And it's like, well, hold on. You can't just bring up the EU whenever you want and whenever it's convenient for you to say, oh, look, we're giving, respect and we're giving love to this era, right? To the EU era. It's like, no. Like, you can't just throw that, because oftentimes what they do is they take some random obscure reference or obscure thing or item that is in an EU novel, comic, and then they change it into something that's actually stupid. So whereas it may have worked in the novel, may have worked in the comic, it doesn't actually work in practice in the shows and in the movies that they're putting forward, right? But anyway, that was from MovieWeb. From Slate, Sam Adams gave the show a rotten review. He says, the show pulls back from its most audacious possibilities in a way that suggests the heavy hand of brand management chipping away at anything that might rock the boat, which is kind of insane to me, because it sounds like what Sam Adams from Slate is saying is that it doesn't go political enough. It doesn't go identity politics enough. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that these are reviews only from the first 2 episodes, because those are the ones that have been released. I still remember with Rings of Power, there were like over 130 plus reviews for Rings of Power for the first episode. And then there were still over 100 for the second, still over 100, I think, for the third, because the first 3 were the ones critics had early access to, right? That was the one that they were able to, they got early access to that. So they were able then to get those reviews out there, right? In the case of this one, I don't know if they've gotten further episodes. I'm having to assume that they have only gotten the first couple episodes like everybody else. And don't be surprised, because by the end of Rings of Power, going back to that one, it started off at 130. It ended with like 13. So that means only 13 of the critics, who some of them gave it amazing high scores, only 13 of them actually stuck around to watch the whole show. So the high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes then for that show are completely irrelevant and are completely faulty. Expect something similar, I would say, probably for this show too. Especially if, as Frank Gore said, now because Frank, I called him Frank right off the gate. Sorry, Chris Gore. He's not Frank anymore. He's Chris. I know that what Chris Gore has said is that by episode 3, that's when things start to go off the rails. So I'm wondering if maybe then there have been some early access to more than at least the first couple episodes. But have they gotten all of the episodes or not? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it'll be mentioned here. Says Rodrigo Perez at the playlist gives the film a positive B-. He states the texture of what Hedlund is toying with in The Acolyte feels like it requires a deep level of sophistication that might be slightly out of this series' reach. Okay, anyone that's going to try to say that she is some brilliant writer that is above and beyond the series or the viewer, I'm going to have doubts about that very, very easily. Rob Owen lampooned the series with a rotten review. He wrote, "This is the first Star Wars series to give off a Star Trek next-gen vibe. It doesn't help that the show's momentum can be slow, with too many dull exposition pit stops, even as episodes clock in at a light 32 to 42 minutes. Yeah, that might be light, but I would say for me, to hear that and to think about the kind of content that the person who wrote the show and created the show puts out and the intention that she has, something tells me that that's going to still come in a bit long. Still going to come in a bit long. Serena Barr at Metro gave the series a positive 3.5 out of 5. She wrote, "The series manages to carry off its world building in a way that feels organic rather than forced, and without it feeling as though you're being overwhelmed with the amount of information you're expected to remember." Okay, so you're going to be thrown a bunch of information. It's probably going to be very confusing and not make sense. Belen Edwards at Mashable gives the show a positive score, stating, "On top of being an enthralling thriller, one of the Acolyte's greatest strengths is how it deepens our understanding of the Force, its uses, its boundaries, and who gets to wield it." We'll talk about one of those uses of the Force in a second. Let's see. Eric Goldman, IGN, gave the film a positive 6 out of 10. 60%. Guess technically you could say positive, but 6 out of 10. Says, "Taken on its own terms, The Acolyte does offer some enjoyable character dynamics and an enticing mystery, but its first 4 episodes," okay, might be an answer there, "fail to coalesce into something that truly shines. But look, it does have a Wookiee Jedi, and that's always a plus. Is it really?" That makes me question everything that you've just said, Eric Goldman, when you say a Wookiee Jedi is a positive. Not to say that that can't happen, but it does, again, make you say, okay, do I really want to see a Wookiee Jedi? I don't think I do. Andrew Webster at The Verge, The Verge, gives the show a fresh score. He stated, "For me, and I say this as someone who really enjoyed the likes of Ahsoka and Obi-Wan." Okay, full stop, Andrew Webster. You've just shown yourself to be a Disney shill if you're going to say that you like those shows. "It has made the Star Wars universe feel not only large again, but also unpredictable in a way that I haven't experienced in a long time." Okay, so more deconstructionist stuff. John Trent, the man, he also includes Metacritic. Metacritic, it gets even worse. Metascore is 6 at 68 in 13 reviews, 8 positive, 5 mixed reviews. Let's see what it says here. James Dyer at Empire gives the series a 60. He said, a Star Wars mystery that interests rather than intrigues. This is spiced up nonetheless by a brand new setting, some arresting force foo, and a Wookiee with a lightsaber. Sounds like the Wookiee is making a bit of a splash here, doesn't it? And then the lowest score is a 50 from Kelly Lawler at USA Today, gave the show its worst rated score. Acolyte has a great deal of potential. The Mandalorian made Star Wars a Western. Andor made it a revolution. Acolyte could have made it great work of fantasy and mystery, but mostly it's a great big sigh. And all of the things that we've just heard there, to my ears, sound more so like excuses trying to cover up something else. Now, according to one of those reviews, it said the first 4. So it seems like they got access to the first 4 episodes. You see how there were all those different positive reviews, right? Probably checked off that Rotten Tomatoes positive score. I will be very interested to see how many of them are writing reviews when the next 4 episodes come out, either when they get access to them or however that's going to work for them as a reviewer, right? Something tells me that the ones that are giving it some of the most positive, most upbeat reviews probably won't be sticking around for the entire show. Again, this is something that we have seen before. Rings of Power, great example. 130 reviews for the first few episodes, dropping all the way down to the teens, and yet we're supposed to believe the show was great because the 100-plus people that were there in the first few episodes gave it such a huge score, they didn't stick around until the very end. And yet the whole series is given a positive rating. Spare me. Spare me the nonsense. If it's that good, you would watch the whole thing and you would review the whole thing. I doubt that will be the case for this. The other thing to keep in mind, so for anyone who doesn't want any spoilers for The Acolyte, something tells me that most of you watching this won't care, but if you don't, here is your one warning. One thing that is probably being missed, at least so far, by those that have seen it, again, a couple in the chat said that they have seen the first couple episodes and thought it was okay. Nothing to write home about, but nothing too crazy. Well, apparently, according to Chris Gore, he gives the warning that the Star Wars Acolyte series will be completely lost on everybody once it gets to episode 3, because it features lesbians birthing twins. Wow, that's a sentence that I have just said in a Star Wars show. Chris Gore, the publisher of Film Threat, warns that Lucasfilm and Leslie Headland's upcoming Star Wars Acolyte series will lose everyone in episode 3. During an appearance of the Geeks and Gamers live stream, Gore warned, I'll just say this, the first 2 episodes are pretty basic. Sounds like what the experience was for people who have seen it so far. They get you into the story and into the world, but episode 3, I'm warning you now, is going to completely lose everyone. Gore then referenced a post to X he made on June 3rd that reads, May the thread be with you, the Acolyte. He explained, they completely redefine what the Force is. You're going to see 2 mothers conceive twins. A bunch of witches that are, basically, the Jedi turned into cops and child protective services. It's like the CPS of the galaxy. What? What? Oh, man. Didn't see that one coming. The witches become like cops and child protective services. Not to mention 2 mothers conceiving. So, and it's that point specifically that I think is the most telling, right? Because that is, I think, what puts you into the mind of Leslie Headland. It's what puts you into the mind of what modern-day Hollywood writers think. And that's why you're seeing some of the things actually taking place in the real world, right? You think about all of the gender confusion. You think about all of the nonsense going on with mutilations. And it all comes from this belief that people have that somehow, as human beings, we can do anything. When the simple fact is that we can't. When the simple fact is, no, we cannot do everything. And even if we could do everything, that does not mean that we should do everything. Just because I might be able to rebuild a specific organ, for instance, keeping it PG, doesn't mean that I should, doesn't mean that I should try to create it in such a way that it might actually be able to even create its own life. And when you see this happening in this fantasy world of the show, Yes, it is a fantasy. Yes, this is meant to be fictional, but I'm telling you right now, that point about the two women coming together and somehow by use of the Force conceiving a child. Right? It's one thing if Emperor Palpatine, because I think that was a part of the comic series, right, is that Palpatine was the father of, in some ways, was the father of Anakin. And again, it was one of those weird comic things that I don't know how much that people have in their headcanon. I don't know if it's a part of the official lore or it's the official part of the official canon of Star Wars or not. But for that one, you're like, okay, but Darth Sidious, he has spent all of his time trying to learn a skill that no one else knew. So even if you're going that far, you at least could say, well, it makes sense, right? He's trying to have control over life and death. It makes sense that he would be able to do something to that degree, right? What that's going on here, though, is just complete utter nonsense, right? But I go back to the point. It's fantasy, and yet this is what they think the world is or what the world will soon become. This is what they would be willing to support as far as scientific research. Oh, can there be a way for us to figure out biologically how to conceive a child? It's like, okay, we're turning human beings into Frankenstein monster things, right? It's Frankenstein's monster. It's turning into us trying to have control of life. It's us trying to play God. And so people would say, oh, this is a fantasy. It's just a Star Wars show. You're too serious. Why so serious? I'm serious because if you look at the world around us, it's clear they don't view this as fantasy. It's clear they don't think that this is something that you just put into a show. This is their wishful thinking. This is what they want. This is their plan. This is what their ideal future looks like. And we have to be very, very careful when it comes to the content being put into these shows and the implications that those things will have for the future. Okay? He goes on here to say, Episode 1 and 2, whatever, it's fine. 3 and 4, get ready for pronouns in Star Wars. It's happening. 3, I'm literally considering having a funeral for Star Wars. Literally get everyone to dress up, wear dark glasses, give eulogies, play organ church music in the background, because after Episode 3 of The Acolyte, it will cause a lot of discussion, aside from the fact that the show is cheap looking. For all the money they spent, it looks cheap. Again, $22.5 million an episode. And Chris Gore, well-known, well-renowned reviewer, says it looks cheap. The exterior scenes in the forest look shot on a soundstage. It looks very, very obvious. Gore then stated, and this is trigger warning, it still lacks male energy. It lacks male energy. And I think that's a big part. They have been such this huge push by Kathleen Kennedy and the people she's chosen, right, to try to make Star Wars into a girl brand. And in a best, most charitable explanation, trying to make it less of a boy brand. The problem, though, is that you are still admitting to the fact that it is and was and always will be, in essence, a boy brand. It just is going to appeal to more men than women. And so when you are acting against the very makeup, the very DNA of the idea, the very DNA of and the appeal that the show has, or rather, sorry, the appeal that Star Wars as an IP has in a natural way, hopefully you can see why these connections are being made, right? Oh, wait, you're going against the nature of the show, kind of like how in our world we have people constantly trying to go against the very nature of what it means to be human beings. Oh, wait a minute. Starting to see some connections here, right? It's a completely different worldview. In many ways, it's a return to the worst philosophies that have ever existed. Not to get too philosophical, but it reminds me of the philosophy of the sophist. These are the people that hated Socrates. These are the people that really, were pushing for the death of Socrates, even though they were the reason why Athens fell. They were the reason why society crumbled. Because these sophists, and a very well-known one was Protagoras. And Protagoras is renowned for having said the expression, man is the measure of all things. In other words, I am the measure of myself. I determine what is good and evil. I determine what is right and wrong. If you have a differing opinion, guess what? If you have a different truth, guess what? That's fine. But we know that that can't coexist. Because if I believe with every fiber of my being that I am the source of truth, that I am my own God, and you believe you're your own God, that's not going to not clash at some point over some very important things. And yet, what's our world doing? Our world is going towards chaos, is going towards destruction. I am the measure of myself. And now we're seeing it in the stories. So we know what they believe. We've seen it in their decisions. We've seen it in their interviews. And now we're seeing it even more clearly in their shows. We're seeing it more clearly in their content. It says, the women that put together the show cannot make Star Wars for the audience that has loved it for years. It's devoid of everything you used to love, not even having shreds of it. He says it notes a change in the world in episode 3. It'll change things forever, and I don't think anyone's going to like it. And we'll get a lot of lesbians in space, lesbian witches that conceive children, so get ready for episode 3. He went on that Headland effectively taken the corpse and skin of Star Wars like Buffalo Bill and just put it on to tell a story. It's grotesque. It's filled with narcissism. Again, I am the measure of myself. Narcissism. It's all there. All the white guys are sidelined or weak. All of them in this show. Not surprised. Discussing the first episode, Gore noted there are 2 mothers. In the first episode, listen very carefully. She says, you lost your mothers and family in a fire. I had to go, wait, why did she say mothers? I rewound it, mothers, that's episode 1. Then that pays off in episode 3. You see the story of these 2 young girls. The actress is terrible that plays the twins, which makes me very, very sad because that tells me that she's now been officially and firmly impacted by a lot of this identity politics nonsense, because the young actress who's playing the twins, she played the character of Rue in the first Hunger Games film. And I remember when I saw that, I was very impressed. I said, wow, as a child actress, she's got potential. I was like, that was a good performance. As limited of a role as that was. It's like, that's potential. That's promise. Apparently, all of that's now just been wasted because you don't become a better actor when you become an activist. And that's what it kind of seems, at least, with everyone involved with the project in some way. There's activism instead. Gore concluded that it's like the death of a friend, a beloved friend. Death of a franchise that we all loved in the past. So those are some of the early reactions there. What say you? Get through the chat, and then we'll do an update on box office. So Sebastian says, what do you hope Tarantino will do now instead of the movie critic since he canceled the project? So remember, he has canceled projects before, so I would not give up complete hope on the movie critic, okay? I hope he does it because it sounded like a really cool story. I just want him to make a movie because he's very talented, and I hope that he ends up going past his limit, right? The self-inflicted limit he was going to put on to himself of only doing 10 films. Remember Sci-Fi, Johnson took the Spaceballs chase scene and made it into a whole movie, basically. Prince Screen, with that being said, did Ezra Miller affect The Flash since he was a literal criminal? I don't think so, because the DCEU films were never big money makers. There might be some DC fans out there, but I'm sorry. They never were big money makers. Only one DC film ever made $1 billion, and it was Aquaman. And we can make some pretty educated guesses as to why that happened. But none of the other ones were huge hits. Because the budgets were huge. They made the vast majority of their money overseas, so they made money back in many of those cases. But they were never huge hits. They never saw anywhere close to the success that MCU films had, for instance. So no, I think that it didn't help, but it was definitely not a reason or a key reason as to why it lost money. Let's see, Heartbreak Rage says, there's no way normies knew about Richton's comments anyway. Agreed. Absolutely. Us in this space, we know about it, but most people don't, right? So why would they care? Jay Price, what's going on? Heartbreak Rage, there's a lot of writers who should give their credit to Alan Smithy. Isaj Mludi, what's going on, Isaj? Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, she's okay. She's just laying down on the bed behind me, and then River, who I had to leave because obviously, I'm not going to take both of them to the vet when they don't have to. She was behind a gate. She escaped, River did, because she has some separation anxiety. she escaped and she destroyed the blinds that we had in our upstairs. So that was fun. Keely Chow, as a member, says, pre-Disney EU is greater than Disney Star Wars. Oh, easily. Versailles, Disney treats the Force how CW Smallville treated Kryptonite. Whatever the plot needed that week, that green magical rock would do. Yeah, I think... I don't know. I don't know much about the comic for Superman, but I feel like at the very least it was being true to that to a certain degree. I definitely see what you mean, though, because Kryptonite ended up being everywhere. It was the cause of everything. And I was like, I don't know about that. Keely Chat says, red Kryptonite is a wild card. There you go. Matt R says, I am alive. I'm glad to hear it. Heartbreak Rage, Star Trek Next Gen, more like Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, probably. Prince Green, a Wookiee Jedi that's next... A Wookiee Jedi, what's next? Russian Captain America? A Wookiee Jedi wearing clothes, no less. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Heartbreak Rage, and there's the reason why it got dumped out in June. Yeah. Yep. With everything that we have just seen from that one article alone, it's like, okay, so this show was meant to be a Pride Month show. And you know what's so funny? They're not going to watch it. The people that are most invested in Pride, in the sin of Pride, and all the things that are entailed by it, guess what? Don't actually watch it. And will not actually watch it. Keely Chow, who's a member for the member chat, said, who's the surrogate father? The Force. Yep. It would be the Force. Yep. WTF. Yep. That is what happens, apparently. For sci-fi, Disney bought Star Wars to branch out from being a girls' brand and then turned it into a girls' brand. Genius. I know, right? With friends and... colleagues like these, why do you need enemies? Why do you need competition? When you're competing with yourself and destroying your own brand and reputation, why do you need anyone else, right? Brit Screen, we don't know the father. Time to bring Mari into Star Wars universe. So what's it going to be, Bob the Midichlorian? Bob the Midichlorian, you are the father. Yeah, but you can't be surprised by it, right? Oh, well, we really want to show a modern example of a family, and so let's just have the Force be the way in which they're able to conceive, so that way a man doesn't have to be involved in any way. And that's something that they would love to have in real life, right? They would love to be able to have children without the need of a man. This is a part of that modern ideology. And again, it's a part of this narcissistic, I am the measure of myself, I determine all things that are real, rejection of objective truth, rejection of objective morality. Let's see, IMJMS says, will you see Deadpool 3 when it comes out? Yes, absolutely, I'll see Deadpool 3. It's one of the very few movies I'm actually looking forward to watching. Abomination over on Odyssey. What's up, brother? Glad to see it's working on Odyssey. There's a centralized agency tasked with taking children away from parents of all species of aliens all across the universe? I know, seriously. How deep are they going to go? Prince Green, history has not been kind to men who play God. James Bond, agreed. Ambrose, revenge of the Barbie in the future. Yes, pretty much. That's it. Barbie is a boy brand now. We've all had enough. We've all had enough. Forget American Girl. Now it's American Boy. Get ready for American It doll. American They doll. Prince Green, if that Acolyte was TV show, it would get the Friday night death slot. I mean, yeah, it would get canceled in no time. No one would watch it. Orange Hat says, if they confirm that those twins are born of the Force, then yeah, that will be it for me. There was a reason Anakin was born of the Force, because the Sith tried taking control from the Force. Yeah, and again, I don't know everything about that plot point specifically. I just remember there was a huge comic panel that was showing, right, that, oh, Palpatine actually is the reason why he was born. And it was manipulating the Force to do something like that. But I don't know if that comic implied that there was actually first a sexual relation between them, and then he used the Force to control the process of conception, or if instead it was him actually bringing about conception through the Force or not. I don't know for sure what that case might be. But again, based off of what we're hearing right now, it sounds like the Force has to be the father. That's what's been confirmed from episode 3, right? As it says, Chris Gore, who has seen episode 3, says that that's what happens. That they create a child by using the Force. Abomination says, Odin, if the Force is the father, then that makes the Force male. Exactly, Abomination. I don't think that they have fully thought this through. Because, yes, that's what they have to admit. That the Force actually has a gender. The Force actually has a sex. The Force actually is male. Now, to be fair, the Force permeates, penetrates, binds us. I mean, the words are there to imply it for sure. Orange says that comic was confirmed by the author to be the dark side lying. Ah, okay. So it didn't actually happen. Okay. Well, apparently it's coming back, Orange Chat. I wonder if Leslie Headland, when she was writing it, she said, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, you're not going to go through with it? Okay, I will. And I'll take the man out of it altogether and just have it be the Force. Okay. Exactly. That's not how the Force works. Rogue Attraction, what's going on? All right, last thing, and again, I know that the Geeks and Gamers daily stream is starting up, if it's not started up already. We'll just do one last look, though, at early box office, what's going on box office for the summer, because obviously summer box office has not been very good, but tracking updates, so this is as of 5/28, so this is a bit dated now at this point, but as you can see, the early projections for this week were that Bad Boys Ride or Die would get somewhere between $50 and $70 million in its domestic opening. The Watchers getting 12 to 20 million. This is the new film by the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan. Next week is Inside Out 2. That had early tracking of 70 to 80 million. The Bike Riders the week after that looks actually pretty interesting. 8 to 15 million. Now, going over instead to Box Office Theory, this was updated 5/31. Okay, so a little bit later in this case, but still similar numbers. So for him, he had it, Sean Robbins, he had his projections to say around a 45 million low-end opening, 55 million high-day opening with, most likely being around 48 million. I would not be surprised to see it in that $30 to $40 million range, personally. I am also one, I don't know the brand. I don't know the Bad Boys branding in general. In fact, let me go ahead and pull this up real quick to see if I can get some numbers on this. Because this is how, and oh man, if you misspell it on the numbers, it will not find it. They really need to have something integrated into their chat so that way if you have like a slight misspelling, it actually, brings things in. Anyway, while I wait for that to load up, your average patient nerd, hail to you. Thanks for being here. Orange S says, if they use the Force to create life, then 2 women did something that Sith spent centuries trying to do. I will be ripping this show a new one next week. Yep. And again, that's at least according to what Chris Gore has said. All right, let's see. So for worldwide grosses, the first Bad Boys was 141 worldwide. 2020's was 424 million. Bad Boys 2, 273. But let's go ahead and actually pick up the, let's see, Bad Boys for Life. Let's compare this to Bad Boys 2. And let's see if it gives us let's just use Bad Boys 2 as the metric there. Let's adjust for inflation. All right. So Bad Boys for Life in 2020. And this was in January of 2020, okay? I believe that this would have been right before COVID stuff. So COVID would have affected potentially the long-term ramifications of the box office for this film. But the film still got around $500 million worldwide, okay? So the equivalent today of around $500 million. And what's interesting is the opening weekend domestic was $73 million. Now, Bad Boys 2 in 2003 was higher, adjusted, $83 million there, and its total actually is less. So clearly, there seems to be a market, okay? So though I am always going to be skeptical of big openings being projected for films, when I'm not a part of a franchise, I will say I don't have the necessary foreknowledge to know how passionate a franchise is or how passionate the audience of a certain franchise is. So when I look at these numbers, okay, the last couple of Bad Boys films, Bad Boys 2 in 2003, which I hear a lot of people say good things about, Bad Boys for Life in 2020, which I heard some people liked, I look at that $73 million number and I say, okay, that to me probably is going to be the max in today's world. Because obviously a lot has now changed since COVID. People don't have expendable income anymore. It seems like these films might have been those movies where you're like, man, I don't really care about whether it's good or not. I just want to go to the theater and have a good time. There's not a lot of people who want to go to the theater and have a good time anymore. People would say, I'd rather just stay home and have a good time, or I'll just wait for this to come out on streaming instead. So I look at this and I say, okay, these early projections are possible. Okay, so 50 to 70, theoretically that is possible. 45 to 55 sounds more accurate to me. And I tend to trust Sean Robbins a bit more than anyone else on when it comes to early projections. He'll have some early numbers. I'm sure he'll have these updated going into the weekend of what he thinks the final one will be. But again, 45 to $55 million. Okay? We'll have to wait and see. But we'll actually, let me look at one more thing here, because this will be the bigger metric. So even if it does have a big opening, guess what? You got to be able to pay off your debts. And okay, $100 million budget. That's actually low. That's from Collider, so I'll take that number with a grain of salt right now. But that actually isn't bad. That's about what they spent on Bad Boys for Life in 2020, and it's a lot less than what they spent on Bad Boys 2. So will Bad Boys for Life make money? $100 million, still you have to make quite a bit. You have to make probably close to $300 million worldwide to break even, depending on where you make your money. If you have an opening like that, it's possible. We'll have to wait what those international numbers are. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to the last comments in the chat, and then we will wrap it up for the day, so that way Geeks and Gamers Daily can get a few more viewers. Let's see. Heartbreak Ridge, who is a member, said, the Acolyte also apparently continues to tiresome. There is no good or evil, only shades of gray, so F that. Yeah. Which is so ridiculous. Not to mention, one of the guys in the show twice said, yeah, remember when Anakin blew up the Death Star? Twice. Ambrose Chamberpot, doesn't the Force impregnating a woman mirror a similar story in one of the books you really like? Didn't I mention, wait, what? Took me a second, Ambrose, to pick that one up. Yes. One of which is dealing with God. Very different situation. Oh, gosh. Anyway, MSC Peggy Soda. Star Wars wants to mirror the shows that people enjoyed in those two ancient cities before they were hugely inconvenienced, you know. Yep. Let's see. Ambrose says, wait for streaming equals 2 weeks. Yep. Movies usually took a year before being released on VHS. Yeah, and that's the thing is apparently they announced for one of the things that has been announced for the upcoming film, my goodness, blanking, Inside Out 2, is that they're planning a long theatrical window for it. Now they say that. Do not be surprised if they change that if the numbers not end up being not as good as they wanted it to be, as I had hoped it to be. Because if those numbers come in really, really low, and if it starts to drop off a cliff, they'll change their attitude real quick and say, oh, never mind, we're going to move it to streaming. Because I don't think that film is going to do very well, personally. Prince Green, movies that used to be fun and casual theater trips are now just wait for streaming. Only big event movies bring people out. And even the big event films, it's not a guarantee, right? Because how do we even quantify what a big event film is even these days anymore, right? I think that it comes down to not just films being big event, but marketed well. Marketing is key. Word of mouth is key. That's why the only film I think that's going to be a huge hit this summer is going to be Deadpool & Wolverine, because the marketing has been so good, so effective. Kelly Chow, thank you for a great show. Thank you very much. Abomination, Bad Boys 2 had lots of reshoots and explosions. $200 million is really high, but you can kind of see that in the effects. Okay, yeah, that's what I've heard. And it seems like it did pretty well. Again, all things considered at the box office for the kind of movie it was. And I know it's gotten a huge life after the fact, right? A huge life after the fact, because I know it's gotten a lot of Blu-ray sales and things like that. Let's see. Orange Eye Review says, quote from the Reg of the Sith, good is a point of view, Anakin. While GL gives defined roles of good and evil, the evil does believe they are good in Star Wars. It happens in real life, too. Yeah. And I think that ultimately the problem is that they, from what we've just heard from these early reviews and also just from what we know in what their general belief in life is that they don't believe in good and evil. They don't believe in objective good and evil. They might say they do, right? Because if you mention a certain conflict going on in the Middle East, for instance, they'll say, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. Well, in order to say that, you have to then say that there's an objective good and evil. And if there is an objective good and evil, then you have to accept it in all areas. It's a universal principle. And this is why so many of these people, these college students especially, need to quit the colleges that they're at, go to maybe an online program, maybe read some books, something, but whatever they need to do, they need to get a classical education, reading not just the great works of history, but they need to have a good philosophy course. They need to have a good philosophy course because they clearly don't have any idea of first principles. If even in ancient Greece, you had someone like Socrates able to look around and say, all right, this place is going to hell unless we live a life of virtue, unless we realize that there are universal principles out there that we need to strive for, right? A pre-Christian understanding of God, a separate from Judaism understanding of God. We need it so desperately in our world right now. Anyway, so Keely Chow, last comments here before we end the stream. The force of impregnating a woman just makes as much sense as an old woman giving birth to a human hand and a man impregnating another woman. All right, the human hand thing, I definitely got that. I got that Mae Young reference, old school WWE. GL George Lucas, gotcha. While George Lucas gives defined roles of good and evil, the evil does believe that they are good. Oh, absolutely. Everyone believes that they're on the right side. But objectively, you look at that movie and you realize, no, they're not. Clearly, they're not on the right side. So anyway, with all of that being said, that is going to be a wrap for this morning's news. Mr. Wink in the chat, there he is. I didn't know if Mr. Wink was going to be able to make it today. But Mr. Wink is here. Mr. Wink is indeed here. So let me make sure that this is accurate. It is. Okay, perfect. Mr. Wink, what's going on? Anyway, that's going to be it for me, everybody. So thank you all very much. I will keep everyone posted about whether I'll be in Dallas. So if you're going to be in the Dallas area, please let me know so that way I can try to look out for you. And I will be posting on social media probably today because I really need to make final decisions sometime today. So be on the lookout for that, and I'll confirm whether I'm going or not. Obviously, if family or there's other events that come, sometimes obviously things come up last minute where it might change. But I'll give a general confirmation of whether I'm going or not. Yeah, smash that like button. Only 8 likes, but there's been at least 40 people watching this entire time. So please smash that like button. According to my viewpoint, it looks like there's 43 people who have actually given the like button. So I don't know if that might just be you need to update the page, Heartbreak Ridge. But yeah, if you are still here and you have not smashed the like button, please do so. It does help with the algorithm. Share this out as well if you found this informative, entertaining in any way. And as far as schedule, so I am going to be hitting the road on Friday, planning to. Again, I'll confirm that in a second. I'll confirm that later today. So Friday, I might be on FNT. I might not. Depends on if I can join from the road or not. And then I will not be on the... Well, actually, no. I might be able to remote in for Salty Saturdays. So again, depending on the weekend, I might be here for Salty Saturdays. And then I will be back to a regular scheduled program. Next week, we'll have a regular week next week. And then the week after, that's when things get a little bit chaotic and a little hectic. But anyway, with all that being said, let's say goodbye to some people. The Seth Rollins thing. Yes, Keely Chow. Got it. Thank you. Tina Guzman. It has been smashed. Good. Thank you. We're up to 46 likes. Joey Horn. Great stream. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yes, Reload 45. Never mind my blathering. Carry on. No, it's all good. Clearly, there were a few people that did not smash that like button. So anyway, thank y'all very much. Hey, have a good time at work, Mr. Roy. Sorry, Mr. Wink. Mr. Wink. Anyway, we talked about a lot of things today. Thank y'all very much for watching. Like this video, smash the like button, like the fire button, Aussie, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed month of the Sacred Heart. Screw the whole pride stuff. This is the month of the Sacred Heart. That's what it's all about. And I hope all y'all have a blessed one. Glackener, thank you for being here also. All right, everybody have a good one. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, Subscribe Star, Locals, and YouTube members who are at the Chosen of Valhalla level. Starting off with my Patreon supporters, Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, which is Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. To my Subscribe Star Chosen members, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, and also the K-Man, check him out at xtheboundaries.co, and a shout out also to my one Chosen of Valhalla YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Thank you again for being so much of a huge supporter of the channel. And to every one of my chosen members, if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, or if you want access to things like giveaways of Blu-rays, 4Ks, etc., and access to an exclusive podcast bonus material for members, check out the links in the video description below for all of those details. You guys are amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed month of the Sacred Heart, and as always, God bless.